How can you communicate better with your wife? This is a mini podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. On my mini episodes I do on the weekend, I do much longer episodes during the week with wonderful guests. So if you want to check out one of those afterwards, feel free. But I'm going to talk about an issue that keeps coming up with the men that I work with, how to communicate better with their wives or girlfriends. It doesn't really matter. Right? This is a big issue. We get into a relationship. We've been together for a while. We get into this culture of communication or a culture in our relationship, right? And maybe the culture of the relationship is a bit toxic. It's filled with assumptions. It's filled with projection. It may also be filled with a lot of how you've been in the past, especially if you've been with someone for, say, 20 years, right? The way that you've been together in the early days, right, starts to set in stone, and how you kind of relate to each other. It's almost like we have a old picture of somebody, a painted picture from the first few years of our relationship, right? And we're holding on to that in our minds, and that's how we communicate to each other, right? And that can be a massive issue and a very difficult thing to break down in the relationship and start to change that, because there's a new way that you're wanting to relate to each other, a new way you're wanting to communicate to each other, right? So where do I think you should start first, right? One of the places I always recommend to the men I'm working with, right, when they're wanting to really change the culture of the relationship and how they communicate with their partner is to take responsibility and make a commitment, right? This might sound quite drastic. So you're going to talk to your partner, go to him, hey, I want to just be really honest and be like, you take responsibility for I almost said we there. You take responsibility for yourself, right? I have not shown up and communicated in the ways that I have wanted to in this relationship. And whatever it is that you can see that you have commonly done, whether that is not listen, not be honest, not speak up, be defensive, shut down, not express your emotions, avoid vulnerability, whatever it is, right? Whatever you see, right, that you've been doing and you've done, you tackle it and say, I've been doing this. You show the self-awareness that you can see what you've been doing, right? And you make a commitment to change. You make a commitment that you want something different. Maybe you're going to be more open. You're going to be more honest. You're going to communicate when you're running late or whatever it may be, right? You make a commitment, right? And you also ask her if there's anything else you missed. Is there any other ways in which your communication has been poor that she has experienced that she can tell you about? Now, to do this is going to sound really hard because you're going to be confronted with a lot of the things that you do that are pretty shit, right? But she'll trust you more for it, because a man that comes forward with his mistakes is a man you can trust more than a man who tries to hide them, right? So you're going to start with this, like make a commitment to her, make a commitment to your wife. This is what I want to create, right? This is how I want to show up. Right? And she may even say there's ways, you may take ownership for certain things in that moment as well, but you're going to stand forward yourself, right? So you've made a commitment, right? Another thing you're going to want to do in this, right, is set aside time on a weekly or monthly basis in your relationship for a type of check-in. Yeah? That might be talking about what's gone well in your relationship, what's gone badly, what you'd like to change, what you'd experience more of. A place where you both can go and talk and talk uninterrupted. This is a very key part, right? You can talk and be like, this is an issue that I have been feeling in our relationship. And you just listen. You listen, and they say everything and you're like, great, can we talk about that a bit more, towards the end of this time, right? You set aside time to listen and talk to each other uninterrupted, right? Not trying to tell them they're wrong or how they saw things incorrectly or anything like that. That is not what this time is for. It's to listen, to understand, right? Really important thing to do. Another point you got to really think about here is the way in which you've communicated. I kind of touched on it before in the first point around the assumptions, the projections, and all these things we do where we just don't listen to our partners. We don't listen to what they're actually saying or what's going on with them because we're distracted. We're looking at our phones, which is a big, big distraction, right? We're looking at our phones, we're watching TV, we're just thinking about something else. Right? Or we're assuming that, they always making the same complaint? It doesn't matter, right? So it's now switching into being present and listening, right? when you're with your partner. You want to shift to communication? Listen better. Listen more attentively. Really be there. Like, okay, you're talking to me about your day. Instead of the story in your mind going, this bullshit day, I don't care about her work. Her work is stupid. The people she works with are stupid. She has the same complaints. I don't care how she feels about her boss, whatever it may be. You sit and you listen. Yeah, you listen. And you do active listening, which is like you're engaged, you're listening. You're not buying in. You're not giving your opinion. You're not giving your suggestions on how to fix it. You're just listening, right? Listening is the most important part of communicating, right? Listening to understand. Key, listening to understand, not give your opinion, not to disagree, just listen to understand. Even when she's criticizing you, listen to understand. You listen to understand. Even if you think what she said is untrue or she's character assassinating you, whatever, you just listen to understand. And that is a deep practice to do, first of all, in a relationship, right? Because you're so used to being reactive. You're so used to be like defensive or like, no, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. That's not how it was. That, in the same way that, to be honest, that's what small children do, right? You speak to an adolescent, someone who's in their 13, 14, 15 years old, that's how they communicate. But most people have never lifted themselves out of that level of communication, that sort of 14-year-old communication. We get stuck there, being defensive of our ego constantly instead of actually trying to understand the person in front of us. Because the key here is that everybody has their own perception. They see the world through their lens. They see the world through their experiences they had, the stories they tell themselves about themselves, and they tell themselves about the world. So you're not right and they're not right, right? No one's really right because you're just filtering everything through your experience, right? Everything through the lens of which you see the world. And if you just keep butting up against who's being right and who's being wrong, right, you get nowhere. You just create more disconnection. So being really present to your partner and actually listening, being present to your wife, listening to her deeply, being curious, looking her in the eye, asking her, oh, you said that. Can you expand on that a little bit so I can understand that a bit better? Yeah? Listening to understand, presence. And obviously this is the part of it, right? So being present, you need to be like really there, front facing, your torso facing hers, listening to her, looking in the eye, breathing deeply. Right? So you're all there. There's none of this like you're looking at something else, you're looking at your phone, you're scratching around. Just notice all these urges to do those things because that's what's trying to take you away from presence, right? That's the thing that really gets in the way. So I want to dive into reactivity because I think this is really important because often what happens with reactivity is it really just comes from this shame that we're feeling or this guilt or this wanting to avoid ever looking like we've done something wrong, we've made a mistake. Because we have this like shame and fear around if we make a mistake, that means we're broken, there's something wrong with us, right? And this is a really key thing we need to be really, really mindful of. It just gets in the way of us actually connecting. So it's really understanding that you have all this emotional reactions happening in you, right? And just being with that while also being present to your partner. And just seeing how reactive you are, the times you get defensive, the times you try and disagree or tell them they're wrong or, get moody just because they ask you to do something where you're telling yourself a story of what they mean, right? And if you noticed, I haven't even talked about speaking yet. I've just talked about listening and being present because that will go such a long way in your relationship. If you listen and be present, you want to communicate better, listening and be present will go so, so far, right? So now you're less defensive, you're practicing that. It's also listening with a little bit more of love, right? And care. So that's listening with less assumption about who your partner is, especially the negative stuff, right? If I ask you, what are some of the stories you tell yourself, you run over in your mind about who your wife is, right? And how she acts, right? And the sort of person she is, you're going to have a whole long list. Oh, she's lazy. She just talks endlessly. She's really emotional. She overreacts over things and blah, 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 blah. And all that stuff is getting in the way of you actually knowing who she actually is. Because you're talking to her like you know who she is and you don't. You don't. If you really did know who she was, right, you really got her, you wouldn't have any issues with communicating. It's because you have a projection in your mind of who she is and that doesn't marry up with reality and that creates conflict. So you've got to start listening with more love, less story, less assumption. while also speaking with more kindness, compassion, understanding. Slow things down, because often what happens is we're trying to rush through things, right? You know, if we've got kids, we've got businesses, we've got lives, but we kind of treat our partner, our wives, as if they're like just another thing to take care of. So inside this listening with love, speaking with love, it's like expressing your needs openly. Like, what do you need, right? And what do you not need? Being clear with what you want instead of making assumptions that they should just know. That's one of the worst things you ever do, is just assume our partner should just know. So it's starting to like express yourself, what's going on for you, how you're feeling about certain things, and taking responsibility. So it's like this violent communication is like, you did this to me and you made me feel this, right? That just creates walls, that just creates barriers, that just creates people's egos to come up, right? But if you take responsibility, like, oh, when you went to the grocery store, you went to the shop, right? And you forgot and didn't come back with the thing that I asked you for. I made that mean that you don't care about me or that you don't love me, right? Opposed to, you don't care about me and that's why you didn't buy my sandwich that I asked you for, or whatever it is. You see the difference there? You're seeing that the thing happened, right? But you're taking ownership for the story and the feelings and emotions that you're putting on yourself and you're creating. Yeah? Responsibility, the key thing here. One of the last points I'm going to say before I wrap up is you've got to create a space in your relationship where the two of you feel safe to express yourselves emotionally, right? When there's no safety, people can't open up, they can't be vulnerable, they can't be honest. So key here is practicing everything that I've talked about consistently, while also when you don't practice it, when you fall out of the practice, you fuck up, basically. You mess up, you make a mistake, whatever. You own up to it and you clear it up. That will create so much emotional safety in your relationship. You'll be like, I can see where I was actually defensive yesterday, and I'm sorry about that because I made a commitment not to be defensive. She'll trust you more. She'll listen to you more. She'll be more open to your suggestions. She'll be more open to your ideas because you've been consistent, and also you're seeing yourself more clearly. You're being more self-aware. You're being more aware of the relationship and the culture you're creating here, right? You've got to be really mindful of because you might have created these patterns in your relationship that are really detrimental to you, and taking responsibility for those, right? So on this one last thing, this is a bit of a thinking point. What are the past personal patterns and family patterns, parental patterns, your mother and father, that you can see you're repeating in your relationship? What are the past personal patterns, right, or family patterns that you can see that you're repeating in your relationship in your marriage, right, with your wife? That's a key thing, because if that's the case, if you see those patterns, it's not just about her, it's about you. It's about things that you've absorbed and you're reenacting in your life, right? So I've told you about taking responsibility, being more present, right? Understanding and listening, being less reactive, and listening with love and speaking with love and care, right? And being in clarity as well. These are all aspects of leadership, right? Masculine leadership in relationship, and creating that emotional safety. So owning up when you do step outside of what you said you're going to be, right? When you've been reactive, you've been defensive. These are the key parts. This is something you want to dive deeper into. If you're looking for some personal support, I also work with people one-to-one. But if not, take this advice, make good use of it, right? Change your marriage, because it's much easier you don't want to just keep getting rid of marriages,